It's the 10th of April, 1912. The RMS Titanic, the largest, grandest, and most luxurious ship ever built, is about to set sail on its maiden voyage. It's a historic day as this magnificent vessel leaves Southampton, England, heading for New York, USA. On board, there's a wide variety of passengers. The list includes some of the wealthiest people in the world, industrialists, celebrities, and aristocrats, as well as hundreds of immigrants, all hoping to start a new life in America. This incredible ship is under the command of 62-year-old Senior Captain Edward John Smith, an experienced and highly respected seaman. The Titanic has captured the imagination of people everywhere. It's not only the largest ship ever to sail the seas, measuring a staggering 269 meters in length and towering over 50 meters high, but it is also the most opulent. The luxury in its construction and design is truly stunning. The ship cost a mind-boggling $7.5 million to build back in 1912, a sum that, when adjusted for inflation, would be worth around $400 million today. Inside, the Titanic's facilities and decor are more lavish than even the finest hotels of the time. The ship boasts stained glass windows, intricately carved wooden panels, two enormous grand staircases, a heated swimming pool, Turkish baths, electric baths, a modern gym, squash courts, 4 gourmet restaurants, 2 barber shops, and even a library. The level of comfort and luxury on board was truly unparalleled, and it earned the Titanic a reputation as the ultimate symbol of luxury travel. But the Titanic was more than just a floating palace. It was also considered one of the safest ships ever built due to its advanced design. The ship was said to be unsinkable. White Star Line, the company that built the Titanic, stood firmly behind this claim. In fact, the company's vice president famously told the public that the Titanic was so well designed and engineered that it simply could not sink. However, just 2 days after setting out on its maiden voyage, on April 12, 1912, the Titanic began receiving its first warnings of ice ahead. The Atlantic Ocean, through which it was sailing, was known to be treacherous, filled with massive icebergs and ice fields that posed serious threats to ships. These warnings weren't entirely unusual. Ships frequently communicated with each other using radio technology to warn of hazardous conditions, like icebergs, in certain parts of the ocean. These communications were essential in helping ships avoid danger. After receiving these warnings, the Titanic adjusted its course twice, taking precautions to avoid the dangerous areas. Yet despite these warnings, the ship didn't reduce its speed. It continued moving at its impressive pace of 21.5 knots, roughly 40 kilometers per hour, as it powered forward toward its destination. Then on April 14, 1912, the situation escalated. The Titanic received a total of 7 ice warnings that day, but Captain Smith and his crew, confident in the ship's safety, did not slow it down or stop it. The Titanic continued at full speed. That evening, as the sun set and darkness settled in, the air grew colder. On this particular night, there was no moonlight to illuminate the ocean. The moon had not risen, making visibility especially poor. Atop the ship, in the crow's nest, a small lookout platform perched high above the deck, a crew member named Frederick Fleet was on duty. It was a bitterly cold night, with the icy winds stinging his face and causing his eyes to water, making it difficult to see clearly. At 11:49 p.m., Fleet suddenly spotted something up ahead, a massive iceberg directly in the ship's path. Reacting immediately, he rang the alarm bell 3 times to alert the crew below. He then grabbed the phone and frantically called the officers on the bridge. "Iceberg right ahead," he shouted. First Officer William Murdoch, who was stationed on the bridge, responded swiftly. He ordered the engines to be reversed and attempted to steer the Titanic to the left, away from the looming iceberg, but it was too late. At 11:40 p.m., just 1 minute after Fleet's warning, the Titanic collided with the iceberg. The iceberg was enormous, standing around 200 feet tall and 400 feet long, roughly the size of a football field. Scientists later estimated that the iceberg weighed a staggering 1.5 million tons. It struck the Titanic on the starboard side, toward the front of the ship, near the bow. For approximately 10 seconds, the iceberg scraped along the side of the ship, tearing into its steel hull and leaving several punctures. You might wonder how ice could possibly damage a steel ship. But it's important to remember the immense size and weight of the iceberg. It was like a mountain of ice. Just as a car can be damaged by hitting a tree, the Titanic suffered severe damage due to the force of the collision. Captain Smith and the ship's architect, Thomas Andrews, immediately rushed to inspect the damage. What they found shocked them. Despite the belief that the Titanic was unsinkable, they quickly realized the severity of the situation. The ship was going to sink. In the beginning, the Titanic was hailed as unsinkable due to its advanced safety features. The ship had two key features that gave it this reputation. First, it had a double-bottom hull. This meant that the bottom of the ship was built with two layers. If one layer was breached, the other would remain intact, preventing water from flooding the ship. Second, the hull of the Titanic was divided into 16 watertight compartments. Even if 4 of these compartments were flooded, the ship could still stay afloat. However, the damage caused by the iceberg occurred along the side of the ship, where the double-bottom hull provided no protection, and with more than 4 compartments breached, the unsinkable ship was now doomed to sink. About 20 minutes after the collision, at midnight, Captain Smith gave the order for the crew to send a distress call. They hoped that nearby ships would hear the signal and come to their rescue. Enter senior radio operator Jack Phillips, the unsung hero of our story. He began sending out distress signals one after another, but no response came. He continued relentlessly, believing that some ship somewhere would pick up the call. Finally, after 20 minutes at 12:20 a.m., the RMS Carpathia, a ship not far from the Titanic, received the distress signal. The operator responded, saying they were turning their ship toward the Titanic to assist. However, the Carpathia was still 107 kilometers away. Even at maximum speed, it would take 3.5 hours to reach the Titanic. The question loomed, would the Titanic be able to stay afloat long enough? The rest of the Titanic's crew began launching flares and rockets into the air, desperately trying to attract the attention of any nearby ships. But apart from the Carpathia, there was no response from others. The captain ordered an evacuation using the lifeboats. According to protocol, women and children were to be given priority. However, many passengers weren't alarmed. They believed the Titanic was unsinkable. The company's advertisements had reassured them as much. So despite the collision with an iceberg, most passengers felt there was nothing to fear. When the first lifeboat was lowered, it had a capacity of 65, but only 28 passengers boarded. This pattern continued, with several lifeboats launching only partially filled. As more compartments flooded, the Titanic began to tilt, and slowly the grim reality dawned on the passengers: the ship was sinking. As panic set in, chaos erupted. People began scrambling for the lifeboats, but the ship lacked enough for everyone. There were only 20 lifeboats with a capacity for around 1,200 people, yet there were over 2,200 on board. By 2:05 a.m., the last lifeboat was launched, leaving 1,500 people still on the Titanic. Some tried to find a way onto the lifeboats, while others, accepting their fate, stayed aboard. It was a tragic scene, people praying, crying, and fighting for survival. By 2:20 a.m., the ship broke in two and slowly sank into the freezing water. In less than 3 hours, the Titanic, once deemed unsinkable, was gone. Of the 1,500 people still on board, many drowned while others succumbed to the freezing -2 degrees temperature, dying from hypothermia in minutes. Captain Edward Smith reportedly stayed at the helm until the end, going down with his ship, although some accounts suggest he may have taken his own life. The RMS Carpathia, rushing to the scene, arrived around 3:30 to 4 a.m., too late to save those still on the Titanic, but rescuing 705 survivors in lifeboats. After the disaster, questions and controversies arose, and investigations revealed shocking details. One particularly startling fact: another ship, the SS Californian, had been only 37 kilometers away that night, close enough to save many lives. Just an hour before the Titanic struck the iceberg, the SS Californian sent a final warning about icebergs in the area. But at 11:15 p.m., The Californian's radio operator turned off the radio, and the ship, aware of the danger, stopped for the night. Passengers on the Titanic could reportedly see the Californian on the horizon. Some officers even believed it was coming to their rescue, but the Californian ship didn't reach when the rockets were launched and the flares were dropped. Around 12 p.m., the crew on the Californian actually saw rockets coming from the Titanic. They informed their captain, Stanley Lord, but Captain Lord said, "This is not a distress signal." He assumed they must be partying. If Captain Lord of the Californian had taken these rockets seriously that night, how many lives could have been saved on the Titanic? The next morning, when they turned on the radio, they received SOS calls from the Titanic. They reached the site, but by then it was too late. All they saw were dead bodies floating in the water. Both inquiries into this incident blamed Captain Stanley Lord of the Californian. But this disaster can't be blamed on just one person. Many mistakes were made. As mentioned before, there were not enough lifeboats. The company that built the ship believed it was unsinkable, so they didn't see the need for more lifeboats. Another issue was that the captain of the Titanic didn't hold safety drills. On the day of the Titanic's collision with the iceberg, a safety drill was scheduled. However, the captain canceled it, believing there was no need. After all, the ship was unsinkable. Another major error involved the steersman, Robert Hitchens. That night, when the message was relayed that an iceberg was ahead, the officer on deck gave the instruction to turn left. But in panic, Robert Hitchens misunderstood and turned the ship to the right. This was the wrong direction, bringing them closer to the iceberg. The British inquiry also revealed that many warnings were given to the Titanic about icebergs ahead. Still, the ship continued at full speed. Why didn't the captain slow down? Several theories exist. One popular theory suggests that Joseph Bruce, chairman and managing director of White Star Line, the company behind Titanic, pressured Captain Smith not to slow down. The company was determined to complete the maiden voyage in just 6 days to break a record. They wanted the Titanic to be known not only as the largest and most luxurious ship, but also the fastest. There's a specific incident from April 14th at 2 p.m. where Captain Smith saw the ice warning and showed it to Joseph. He suggested slowing down, but Joseph pocketed the warning so the crew wouldn't know. He didn't want to slow the ship down. This disaster forever changed the industry. New regulations and standards were established to prevent such tragedies. In 1914, the International Ice Patrol was created to warn ships about icebergs in their paths. The International Convention for Safety of Life at Sea Solace Treaty was signed, setting new ship safety standards. The lifeboat regulations were introduced, requiring enough lifeboats for all passengers. The Titanic wreckage remained lost for over 70 years, until September 1985. American ocean explorer Robert Ballard and French oceanographer Jean-Louis Michel finally found it. The wreckage lies 3,800 meters deep, 3.8 kilometers below the surface. The ship was found in two parts, 600 meters apart. Today, after so many years underwater, the ship has eroded. What was once a grand ship now lies mostly gone. Bacteria and organisms are eating away the metal framework, and it's estimated that by 2030, the wreck will disappear entirely. Yet, 110 years later, the Titanic still fascinates people. In 2012, Australian billionaire Clive Palmer announced plans to build Titanic II, a replica of the original. It was intended to follow the same route. The ship was to be recreated in exact detail, just like the original Titanic. Project was initially scheduled for completion by 2016, but faced delays, and even by 2022, it hadn't been finished. While many speculate that the project lost interest because a Titanic replica, without modern conveniences like television and Wi-Fi, wouldn't appeal to people. So it's possible that Titanic II sank even before being built. If you like this video, check out our playlist of the major events in history. Thanks for watching. Bye.